And I'm going to start with a poem that I wrote last year when I was still smarting at the thought of Donald Trump, Boris Johnson and the rest of them running our lives. So I expect you know of Elizabeth Bishop, who Caroline Duffy has called the poet's poet, and her wonderful, I think it's a villanelle, called One Art, The Art of Losing. Now, I've written in response something that's not nearly as good, but here it is. The Art of Lying. The art of lying is a gentle one. Truth so often hard to give or take. Lying can be kind when all is said and done. Your smallest lies you can tell on your phone. Sincerity is not so hard to fake. The art of lying is a gentle one. Go further. Lie barefaced in even tones. Look people in the eye. Refuse to break bad news. Perhaps when all is said and done, when truth's unwelcome, a cocked gun that must be turned aside for pity's sake, the art of lying is a gentle one. Lie cleverly. Sustain lies once begun, with reputation, wealth and fame at stake. Are those lies kind when all is said and done? I said, I love you always to someone. I made promises I later had to break. Is the art of lying a gentle one? Lying's seldom kind when all is said and done. And so that's a rather abstract painting. Poem, rather an abstract poem, but most poems actually start with something concrete, I think. And what I find is that doing normal, ordinary things, little bits of memory come back, and they can start a poem. I'm sure everybody in this room has had that happen. So when I was a 19-year-old art student, I was at Corsham, a village in Somerset, I think it is, and I was really out of my depth. And this is a poem to Mrs. Batten of Corsham, who saved me. Washing my hair. Under the shower this spring morning, I'm suddenly aware that it's more than half a century since I bowed my head over Mrs. Batten's crackle-glazed sink and squinted through the wet brown tangle of my hair. It's like my daughter's come back, she said. In Mrs. Batten's cottage, the steamy kitchen air breathed last night's dumpling stew. The flowered cushion of her pinafore leaned over me as she worked the silvercrin in and rubbed my head with fingers that had cleaned and scrubbed so many children, floors and dishes. Today, as I stare through the thin white hair in my own shower, I know she is under a pitted slab in a village graveyard. I'll never find it, for I never learned her Christian name. I want to thank her for her care. Mrs. Batten was not just a landlady, but a mother when I most needed one. Of course, I did have a mother. I had a mother at home. And we sometimes didn't see eye to eye, but she gave me quite a lot of good advice. This little poem is called Advice. Stirring the porridge, I think of Miss Rymer's grave. She's past her century if she's not in it. I wish I'd written this, she wrote on my homework. Keep stirring, don't stop, my mother always warned. Some advice, some praise stays with you. Keep stirring, life goes lumpy, sticks. So, my mother died some time ago, but she often comes back in dreams. And this is one. Fly, love, fly. In the dream, you are my daughter, not my mother. I lead you on a narrow path above the sea. At my shoulder, a sheer cliff. Below, a deep ravine. You are not afraid. You laugh, run ahead. I give chase, catch your hand, try to lead you to a safer place. Your hand shape-shifts, becomes fish, flipper, slips. You fall slowly into air. In the dream, you are my daughter, not my mother, which is why I call out to you from the path. Spread your arms out, love, and fly. My mother did try to fly. She led a very conventional mid-20th century life as a mother and a wife, but she started to have some thoughts of flying when they were coming up to 60-ish. Retirement plans. When I grow old, said my mother, I'll change my life. I'll rent a garret on the left bank of the Seine in Paris. Give up being a mother and a wife. Spend my days painting, drink red wine all night. My friends will be artists. Maybe I'll write. But what about Dad? I objected. My mother reflected. He'll be okay, she said. He'll buy a jalaba, sandals, a scarab. He'll live in the desert along with the Arabs. He's learning the lingo at evening class. He'll go over to Egypt. I thought, what a gas. I'll spend April in Paris, winter with Dad. There was going to be some fun to be had. I hoped that my parents' dreams all would come true, but after all that, they just moved down to Bude. So, as Barry said, I went to art college, became an art teacher. I went on painting and drawing, of course, but I can't call myself a professional artist. I was an art teacher. So, we went to Paris, to Amsterdam, and we were very, very happy to be able to go into Rembrandt's workshop, where all his etching materials and a lot of his plates are kept. And there were volunteers there, or perhaps there were people making prints, etchings from his original plates. It was amazing. After I'd been there, I wrote this little poem, The Etcher. The artist works bent at his bench in the window. He's deepening darkness from morning to night. He creates holy fire, or spreads shadows of pitch, makes mists, or a scatter of light. Inside the stipple of needle on ground, the bubble of acid, acrid stink of the ink, the creak of the press as the wheel turns around, and the image is coming to its final state. Outside, the ripple of water, the creak of a barge, while Rembrandt is drawing, is scoring the plate. He worked in this room with the low wooden rafters 350 years past, yet still his world is alive in the work that lives after him, in lines bitten deep for the black ink to fill. So, alchemy. That etching is a very physical, chemical process. And a lot of painting can be seen like that. There's a sort of ritual to it. And, of course, it's very much about materials. I read an article about Frank Auerbach and how what he expected from his models. They had to go in, sometimes for a year, once a week, and he would go on working on the same small canvas. So this is called The Alchemist. Every day I offered him myself, or as much of myself as he wanted, and I saw that he wanted all, would capture every fleeting wince, each blink, each flicker of thought, each tightening of the lips. He would chase them with his knife, load brushes and overwhelm them daily, until on the canvas all of my being was reduced to the accretion of his perceptions, his decisions. He called them irrelevancies, those transient expressions, searching for my essence like an alchemist making gold. Those paintings are amazing, they're that thick. My own portraits are usually unsuccessful. The one that I'm fondest of I still have in the attic. I began it in Bangladesh when I was living for really not very long as an expatriate there. This is called Unfinished. Today I met Barua's niece in my attic. She gazed out at me from behind the 40 years since I took brushes, paint, and the blunt instrument of my small talent, and was defeated by her innocent beauty. She was dressed in her wedding sari. Soft yellow gold dripped from her small ears and hung in wreaths round her fragile neck. Every year, the floods arrive in Bangladesh, and I'm long gone to my safe life, my cold world. Who knows if she's the old woman on my TV screen, wailing for her daughter's starving child. She wanted the painting, though it was unfinished. I wish I'd given it to her. Just 2 more poems and we're back to the slightly more abstract and dreams. This is actually based on a painting. I see the moon. Is this the rock that should inspire a lover's kiss, a poet's song? This satellite that owns no light, floating pale in light-polluted sky, remembers itself as huntress, aphrodisiac, goader of the mad. The moon ignores invaders' paltry flags. Its gravity still rules blood and oceans. You whisper, the moon is huge tonight. The mountains are God's dark shoulder but I can only hear the traffic humming and the roar of the flight path overhead. I know the moon is drowning in its orbit, sunk, obscured by Earth's oil-fueled haze. And lastly, insomniac. I dreamed I was insomniac, caught up in feathered arms of an angel whose existence I doubted in waking hours. I held a mirror to his terrible light. On the angel's face ran scars. His makeshift armour had worn thin. The angel was tired. Outside the window, a jungle city stretched to the horizon. We glimpsed a silver river between jagged monoliths. We both were solemn, he questioning why I dreamed of sleeping. Sleep is never wicked, I replied. They say that the just sleep well. He sighed and closed his eyes. I watch the people sleep, he said. The unjust sleep the soundest. No doubts nudge them awake. Self-seeking is unambiguous. Their world is black and white. The unjust see no shades of grey at night. Insomniacs make war on the unjust. Sleep is most wicked when injustice stalks, he said. At midnight, jackboots walk the city streets. The angel was still watching when I left. Unsure if it were dusk or dawn, I stumbled through a sleeping town. I found I could not sleep.